Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237. Coming at you with another, excuse me, random standalone film in between marathons. I am finally going back, hopefully to finish my Universal marathon that I've been doing since Christmas after this review. But this is a movie I just picked up last week. One that I'm a huge fan of the original film. Never seen this remake. It's a classic film, but it is the remake. But now I finally saw it, and that is Nosferatu the Vampyre, or released in Germany as Nosferatu Phantom der Nacht, if I pronounce that correctly, which is German for Phantom of the Night. Now this came out in 1979. And it is a remake of Nosferatu 1922, which again, huge fan of. It's a top 15 favorite film of mine. It's my favorite silent film, my favorite German film. It was close between that and Caligari, but ultimately I think Nosferatu is my favorite. Directed by Werner Herzog, who also wrote and produced the film, and it stars Isabelle Adjani, if I pronounce that correctly, Bruno Ganz, and of course Klaus Kinski, excuse me, as Count Dracula. And yes, even though this is a remake of Nosferatu, at some point in the 70s, the rights to Bram Stoker's Dracula has been put into the public domain, which means they no longer had to do Count Orlok and all those alternate unofficial names. So now we have Count Dracula, Jonathan Harker, Renfield, Lucy, etc. And I actually really enjoyed this film as well. This film was very well received when it first came out, and since, I mean, it didn't really have like The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby kind of acclaim, but it was received very well. Like on the cover, Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars. They made 2 versions of it, which this is the 2-disc. Disc 1 has Nosferatu the Vampyre, the English version, and then disc 2 with, along with the making of featurette, it is Nosferatu Phantom der Nacht, the German version. Now, unlike Dracula in 1931, where you have English and Spanish, but it's 2 completely different filmmakers and actors, slightly different film, this one's exactly the same. It's the same crew, same actors, same script, exact same film. They're just speaking dual languages. Excuse me for one moment. Don't know what it is. My asthma's been bothering me a lot lately. So, I mean, there are some differences between this and the original film, which is going to happen with any remake. I guess it is, I don't really know if it's any more or less faithful than the original film. I mean, to the original novel. But I will say the score to this film is much different than that of the original film. The original film, and keep hitting that thing all night. While the original film has a score of like that gothic church organ throughout the entire thing, this has sort of a mellow, sort of a melancholic score that I really enjoyed. Instead of being this evil creature of the night, they actually set out to make Dracula. It really tapped into the tragic and more so gothic side of him. Whereas, he's a tragic loner, he's doomed to immortality, his longing for love that he can never have. And I thought the film captured that very well, and Klaus Kinski did a great job at portraying that. I really liked him as this version of Dracula. And also the makeup, even though he is Dracula, they really did make him up to be Count Orlok, and they did do a great job with it. Which, I can't remember the actor's name. I know he played Benny in the first of the Brandon Fraser Mummy movies. And he was also the guy that lied to Daniel Day-Lewis about being his brother in There Will Be Blood. But he kind of reminded me of him, just sort of how he looks and kind of the sound of his voice just kind of reminded me of him. But of course, you have Jonathan Harker going to Transylvania, Transylvania. He meets with the Count, brings him back, and a whole bunch of bad things happen. Which, in this one, which, it's been a long time since I reviewed the original. That was the last time I saw it. And I've seen so many movies lately. Even some of my favorite films I'm getting kind of fuzzy on. But, so you have Harker, who goes to Transylvania to finalize the property sales that the Count wants. And only it's not London, it's Wismar, which is like it's a city, but it looks like, it's kind of like a village. His employer is Renfield. And I will say, Renfield in this was one of the detractors of the film. It's like he's trying to do Cesar Romero's Joker a lot, doing this over-the-top laughing all the time. Maybe he's supposed to be the comedy relief, but I didn't really care for Renfield. Everyone else I thought did a great job. You don't really see the mayhem on the ship, but the scenes with, I keep wanting to call him Orlok, even though he's Dracula in this film. Like when they're having dinner together, Harker and Dracula, and he accidentally cuts his thumb. He really made it seem like he needs the blood. Like he forcefully, first he's like, it's the oldest remedy. Then he just grabs his thumb, starts sucking on it. Like throws the chair, and you get this really intense, like face to face, like backing each other up throughout the house. I liked how that was shot. Also, when they're having dinner and the wolves are howling, there's these nice little poetic lines of dialogue, like children of the night are singing their song. Which that's another thing that I think was more like Dracula than the original film. He can not really communicate, but there is a point, because in Nosferatu he didn't turn into a bat. But there's a part where Lucy is reading Harker's diary from when he was over in Transylvania. And it says, like, in the form of a bat, does he drink the blood? Or in the form of a wolf, does he hunt the prey of the night? Stuff like that. I love the scenes with Dracula by himself, like whether it be on the ship or walking through the city. The music, it reminded me of something, but I can't think of right now what it was. I thought of it while I was watching it. But the lighting is beautiful in this movie. Or like when he's carrying his coffin off the ship, or like when he's walking through the city square. beautiful music. I love the way it's lit and the scenes of him just walking by himself. They really do make him the tragic loner in this, more so than any other Dracula film I've seen. And, you know, just making him sort of that pathetic, lonely person that you kind of sympathize with. Almost kind of gives it that Quasimodo kind of feeling, too, because, you know, he looks hideous. But, you know, he wants to be loved like anybody else. So it adds that element of tragedy to it that I think, which is one of my favorite elements of Gothic horror. And of course, you know, he kills all the men on the ship. He kills everyone in the city. People who are left think there's a plague amongst the town. Of course, Harker is under Dracula's spell, as is Renfield. Renfield gets put in this insane asylum. And Lucy, reading Harker's journal, puts it together that this new count is Dracula. He's a vampire. And I like the last passage in his journal. Only a woman who is pure of heart, it's something about her beauty, but pure of heart and something beauty, who can make him forget about the cries of the cock, can something. I know I said I like it, but I can't remember it. You know, the woman who is beautiful enough to infatuate him and also pure of heart enough to make him forget or not hear the cries of the rooster in the morning, then the day will vanquish him. Oh, that's what it says, that the light of day will vanquish him. So when no one will listen to Lucy, and like Harker under his spell doesn't recognize Lucy. I also like the first interaction with Dracula and Lucy. You know, he talks about how alone he is, how beautiful she is, and how he longs for the love that she and Harker have. And, you know, she says something like, nothing, not even God, can ever touch the love that we have. And she spreads her hair, and it shows her crucifix, and that's when he's like, and he leaves. Which, at least in the original film, he wore, it's not a chef's hat, but it kind of looks like a big chef's hat. So, you know, Harker might have just thought he was a weird-looking guy. But during dinner, that's what he looks like. You know, his teeth are out and everything, and he didn't seem to think he was a vampire. Or maybe he did. He didn't say anything, but... So, since... I mean, there's a point where just so many people are dying. There's coffins all over the city. There are people who... You know, they're eating out in the streets because they think they have the plague and they're gonna die too. There's dead horses. There's sheep and goats walking around. Hundreds and hundreds of rats everywhere. You know, Dwight Fry. Rats. I believe that scene's not in here, but no one can do that like Dwight Fry can. But, side note to the animals, it was actually one of the animal handlers, a Dutch behavioral biologist, Martin T. Hart. I pronounced it wrong. He was hired by Herzog for his expertise with laboratory rats, but he witnessed inhumane ways animals were handled, and he quit. He said that, you know, horses and sheep were also treated poorly, but he wouldn't confirm. But the rats, you know, they were transported from Hungary to the Netherlands, where the film was shot. The transportation conditions weren't, no, they were really poor. A lot of the rats ate each other. then there were some rats that were white, and Herzog wanted them dyed gray. So he submerged, or he had a team, submerge them in boiling water, and then dye them. And the ones that didn't die from the boiling water, they licked themselves clean of the gray dye, which was toxic. And you don't really see a lot of gray rats anyway. They're kind of like almost like a vanilla color. So that's pretty horrific. I mean, it's not cannibal holocaust, but that's still pretty cruel. And I read about that long before I ever saw the film. But people that did the music is a German group called Popo Vu. Not quite sure how to pronounce that. But so yeah, once Lucy sees the state of, you know, the city, her once peaceful city, that's when she decides she's gonna be the beautiful, pure of heart woman. So she makes herself up all white, lays in bed, lures the Count into the bedroom, and after he looks her over, she allows him to sink his fangs. And I like how they did this. I haven't really seen a vampire film quite like this. You almost hear the pop of his teeth breaking the skin, and you kind of hear, you don't see any blood, but you can kind of hear like the sucking of the blood. You can kind of hear like a fluid sound. I like how they did that. And once he was done, she kind of pulled him closer, and I think showing that she was in love with him, act like she was. So then he did it again, and I think not killing her, but turning her into a vampire like him to be together forever. But then we heard the cry of the cock in the morning. He realized it was daytime, and he didn't burn or melt or anything like that. It was taken very seriously, which I enjoyed. He kind of convulsed and then died. And Lucy kind of gave a sigh of relief and then died. And then, of course, Van Helsing came in, staked him, but then Harker, who you can tell is still under the spell, had Van Helsing arrested for killing the Count and Lucy. But then they're like, there's no jail, there's no guards, there's no counsel, there's no trial, everyone's dead. But then Harker, he gets the teeth, the fangs, and he's like, I have much to do, and we see him ride off into the desert. So I guess he's going to be the next Phantom der Nacht. But despite the differences, I mean, I do give Herzog credit. At first I was like, oh, they didn't do that scene. Or those scenes, because my favorite images in all of horror history is one where Nosferatu emerges from the darkness through the doorway. And my number one favorite image or shot in horror history ever, the silhouette of Count Orlok going up the stairs. I think that is the single most iconic image in all of horror. At first I was like, fuck, they didn't redo that. But I give it to Herzog not to do that. I think he knew, I think he tried to show that he could make a film strong enough without directly copying the iconic images of the original. So I give him props for that. It's more so, I guess, an homage remake to Nosferatu. reading something. It was 60s to 70s when the original film resurfaced because they thought it was lost forever. It was a lost film for a while. And it got re-released, and people loved it then as they did in the 20s. And Herzog said it was the greatest film to ever come out of Germany. That's why he wanted to do his version. So in '79, when Dracula went into the public domain, he was able to remake it. And this is one of those rare cases where, or this is an example of, I don't care if a remake is different. I don't. I care if it's good or not. I mean, Nosferatu, the original, again, favorite silent film. Obviously, it's not my favorite vampire film because that would be Dracula, but and this one is very different, but it's good. Like, I don't shit on remakes because it's too different or it's too much the same. Well, I'd rather be different than too much the same. As long as it's good. And this movie was good all around. The performances, I mean, I really liked Klaus Kinski as Dracula. They added the sympathetic tragedy to him. The guy that wants to be loved, but he can't. He's doomed to immortality. Even some of his speeches about how immortality is more cruel than death. I liked Isabelle Adjani as Lucy. The only person I didn't like was the guy that played Renfield. Loved the music. Just really had this melancholy, kind of sad, poetic kind of sound to it. Especially the scenes it was put to with the Count by himself walking through City Square or on the ship with nothing but the moonlight on him. Beautiful cinematography. I really enjoyed this movie. And if you're a fan of, vampires, or Dracula in particular, or German films, because there is also some of the German expressionist movement in this as well. But I enjoyed this quite a bit. Nosferatu the Vampyre. Thank you for watching.